And this man is called Jeremiah Burroughs, and he wrote this book, which is called A Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. And the fact that it was written in 1648 tells us it's not far off 400 years old. And yet the message and the relevance of this book is very contemporary and up to date. We live in a world of discontent, not a world of contentment. We live in a complaining world. We live in a world which is always wanting for more. It's not satisfied or calm or content. And we know, don't we, that leads to levels of stress and anxiety, and that leads on to ill health and even onto mental breakdown. So today, we could really do with some calm contentment. Some calm contentment. And as the book title says, it is a rare jewel. A rare jewel. But as our Bible reading this morning shows us, the need for calm contentment is, in fact, something that goes back way before Jeremiah Burroughs and his book. In fact, it goes all the way back to the shepherd King David, who wrote this psalm. Now, we're looking at these psalms of ascent. They're probably psalms that were sung, recited by pilgrims as they went up to Jerusalem for the festivals in Israel 3 or 4 times a year. And I think a little bit like a holiday, maybe those pilgrimages were a kind of a break from the norm and the routine and gave people an opportunity to stop, pause, reflect, think about their life almost as they journeyed. Were they people who were at peace? Were they content? Were they at ease with their life? Or were they fretful every day? So I wonder whether this psalm has come to us at a very appropriate time as we kind of are on the edge of the holiday season. And the routines of your life might be changing over the next few weeks or months. Does it give you an opportunity to pause and wonder whether you are a person who is, in your heart, at peace and calm and content, or whether there is a fretfulness? So we're going to look at this psalm, and we're going to see this psalm kind of really answers 2 questions. Firstly, what is contentment? What is contentment? We're going to look at it according to this psalm. How is it described in this psalm? What is contentment? And then secondly, how do we find it? How do we pursue and mine this rare jewel? Now, Bio read the psalm very nicely for us. I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it in the version that we have in our church Bibles here. And as I do so, I wonder whether you could just have those 2 questions in your mind. How does he describe contentment? What is it? And how does he suggest we might find it? What is it? How might we find it? So here we go. Psalm 131, a song of ascents of David. My heart is not proud, O Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me, but I have stilled and quietened my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. So firstly, how does the writer describe his contentment and his calm in this psalm? He does it in this way. He says, I have stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child. Now that phrase there, stilled or quieted, it's describing the settling of something that had previously been restless. So think of that story that we looked at with the children a little bit earlier. It's about Jesus stilling the storm. He smooths something out by levelling. That's what that word stilled means there. So there was turmoil, there was storm, there was waves mounting up, there was the wind rushing them in one direction or another, and then calm, peace and quiet. That is what it is to have stilled and quieted something, to settle something that was previously restless. And the picture he gives here, as you can see, is of a weaned child. Now, a weaned child is a child who stopped breastfeeding from its mother. That's what the word weaned means. And in Israel, children stopped breastfeeding and were weaned around about the age of 3. So what is being pictured here is that this child previously was one who was feeding from their mother, but now this one is no longer doing so. Now, I happen to have a granddaughter who is under a month old. She is currently very dependent on her mother to feed her. And if she's not asleep, there's one thing in her mind, mainly, which is food. And she wants her mum for her milk. And if you've ever seen a child who's hungry, when it's close to its mother, they call it rooting, don't they? It's kind of restless, it's fretful. It starts to cry if it can't get what it wants. That's a pre-weaned child, you might say, in this imagery. But a weaned child has gone beyond that. So somebody put it like this. It's a child who's gone beyond the stage of seeing their mother as a source of supply, fretless, crying out for what it thinks is indispensable, and has entered the stage of simple contentment to be where mother is. Mother is no longer just this source of supply. I must have what she has. But now I'm content to be where she is. So David is saying here that I have stilled mind, quieted my soul. I have become like a weaned child. He's chosen, as it were, this path of contentment. He's kind of almost said to himself, I'm not going to continually be restless. I'm not going to be continually complaining about life, always fretting for things as if they were indispensable. He says, I'm getting off the ladder of greed. I'm releasing myself from the hounds that simply say more, more, more. David knew that all those things that he sought could not satisfy. So he has weaned himself off of these things. It's almost as if he's kind of saying, I realise that they were false hopes. I have done with them. I'm not looking to them as I used to. Now, it's very refreshing to hear somebody speak who's maybe reached a great goal that they've set in their lives, and then speak honestly about the lack of contentment it actually brought them. And this week there was an amazing interview by a golfer called Scotty Scheffler. And Scotty Scheffler, he's currently, I think, at the top of the leaderboard at Royal Portrush on the Open Championship going this weekend. And he's won 3 golfing majors so far, an Olympic gold medal. He was the world's number 1 golfer for 112 consecutive weeks. He's earned more than £65 million in prize money alone. But this week he said that for all of that, his life as a golfer was not a fulfilling life. It is fulfilling from the sense of accomplishment, but it's not fulfilling from a sense of the deepest places of your heart. And then it's almost as if he kind of stood back in this interview and he made this general point. He said this: there are a lot of people that make it to what they thought was going to fulfill them in life. And you get there, you get to number 1 in the world, and you're like, what's the point? It feels like you work your whole life to celebrate winning a tournament for like a few minutes. It only lasts a few minutes, that euphoric feeling. You can see contentment is a rare gem. And Scotty Scheffler and King David are saying, basically, I've realised it's not there. It's not all these things that we're constantly pursuing. And of course, you can replace the sports award with all sorts of other things. If I have that certain job, if I have that certain person, if I have that certain house, if I have that certain look, if I have that certain car, if I have that certain computer, whatever it might be, it will not satisfy it. And in this psalm, the writer has almost kind of taken action. He's weaned himself off of such appetites, those must-have appetites in our hearts. He knows that they don't fulfill the promises that they make. Now, I think we have to understand that in the Bible, the good things in life are seen as gifts from God. The good things in life are to be appreciated and valued and treasured and not wasted. But the good things are not to be seen as God things. They will not lead to the calm contentment that this psalm is speaking about. They are false hopes, and we need to wean ourselves off of them. So here we are. This is the description that we had. He stilled and settled his heart like a weaned child. So that's the description he's given us of this calm contentment. But how has he found it? Well, I think the answer comes in 3 parts. Answer number 1. It involves a right view of ourselves. Look at the beginning of verse 1 and see how he described himself in the first half of verse 1. This is what we have. My heart is not proud, O Lord. My eyes are not haughty. That's a funny old word. It means kind of look down your noses at somebody. My eyes are not haughty. Now, what he's saying here is, in the one hand, pride is thinking too much of yourself. Haughtiness is thinking too little of others. He's decided not to do either of those because he realizes that both of them lead to discontent because we believe ourselves to be worth more than we might have. Now, you may know this. It's common knowledge, isn't it? But one of the reasons why possessions and position are so important to us as human beings is because we see them as what we might call status markers. We say to ourselves, I'm the kind of person who has this kind of house. I'm the kind of person who drives this kind of car. I'm the kind of person who wears these kinds of clothes. I'm the kind of person who has this kind of job, this kind of title, this kind of responsibility, etc. These things affect how we think about ourselves. And consequently, if we don't have them, we become restless and fretful. And then if we have them and in some way they're threatened, we become frightened and angry and bitter. Now, what he's saying here is he's not rejecting advancement and ambition, but he's rejecting presumption and entitlement. You see, if we think highly of ourselves, if we look down at other people, we say to ourselves, I deserve these things. I'm the kind of person who should have these things and have this position, have this responsibility and have this title and so on. That's what he's fighting against. He's not fighting against, arguing against advancement or ambition, but against presumption and what we nowadays call entitlement. I'm entitled to these things. He says, I realise I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not going to presume on anything. I'm not going to be too high and mighty in my view of myself and looking down upon other people. It's a right view of ourselves that leads towards contentment. The second thing he kind of says here is actually it's a right view of our lives. So look at the second half of verse 1. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. He's kind of realised here that for all our knowledge and all our understanding, we really can't actually get a handle on life. We can never truly be what we talk about being the master of our own fate. That's never actually true. Very often through the twists and turns of our lives, lots of things happen we weren't expecting. We can't control them. And we end up having to live with lots of questions that go unanswered. That's reality. We need to face that. When he says in the second half of that bit, he says, I will not concern myself with things too wonderful for me. That word, which is also translated as marvellous, is the word that's used to describe the actions of God in the history of Israel. So what this writer is also saying is, look, there are certain things that God will do in my nation, in my life, and I will not fully grasp or understand them. I will have to live with unanswered questions about the way that God does things. Now, when we speak and act as if we're in control of life and have sussed it, we will become terribly stressed if things don't go the way we want them to. And the reality that we're not actually running this show will come as a massive shock. Something will happen unexpected and it will completely throw us. But this position here that he takes is one of humility. Humility. I don't pretend I understand it all. I don't pretend to be the master of my destiny. That humility is a great antidote to anxiety and leads to peace and calm. I just want to make a quick application, particularly to parents here, because I know we want our children to find real satisfaction in their working lives, but it is not honest and it is not fair to tell them that they can, quote, be anything they want to be. Who knows what might happen to your child to thwart their dreams and what sense of anxiety and failure they might be left with. If you tell them they can be anything they want to be, that's not fair. It's not honest. And you could end up putting them in a position where they're anxious and feel as if they've been terrible failures because it hasn't quite worked out. Only the honest humility of verse 1 will lead to the contentment of verse 2 in this psalm. But there is a third thing that he has learned. Firstly, he's learned to have a right view of himself and a right view of his life. But the third thing is he's had a right view of God. Look at that in verse 3. O Israel. This is how he ends. O Israel. It's almost as if he stands back at this point and shouts out, O Israel, where will you find calm and contentment? O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. Now look, the first readers who are singing this psalm on this pilgrimage, reciting it, going up to Jerusalem, coming back again, maybe, as I say, they've kind of got this slight break in the normality. They're reflecting on things. Where's my life going? What can I really trust? Etc., etc., etc. They would have been able to recall certain stories and accounts from Israel's history of those who in the past had weaned themselves off of false hopes and put their confidence in the true and living God. I've just come up with 3 examples here. Think about Moses. Many of us know the story of Moses. He's rescued as a little boy in the bulrushes by Pharaoh's daughter. He is raised in the palace in Egypt with all its wealth and all its splendor and all its power. And he could have had all of that for himself for the rest of his life. But he turns his back on it. He weans himself off of that so that he might trust the living God, the God of Israel. And he puts that God to the test in amazing ways, standing at the edge of the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army are chasing out to get him and all his people. And he lifts up a rod and the sea parts and he walks through and Pharaoh's destroyed. All the promise of Egypt, the wealth of Egypt, gone in the water. But his trust is in the Lord. And that's led to calm, peace, contentment. Think about King David himself. He's a young man. And it's been promised to him at a very young age, he will become king of Israel. He's living with that promise. And he's given the opportunity as a kind of a warrior, kind of off the scale warrior. He's given an opportunity to grab the throne. King Saul, who's the current king, comes into a cave to relieve himself. And David and his men are hiding in that cave. And they say to him, you could have him now and the throne would be yours. You can snatch it. Anybody else would. Power, grab it. But David has weaned himself off of a lust for power. He will not grab it in the wrong way. Rather, he will trust in the Lord to give it to him in his time. God's man becomes God's king, God's way. Not by grabbing it. He's weaned himself off of that. He's calm and content to trust the Lord in the timing. And then think about Daniel. Daniel, as a bright young man, is taken from his home in Jerusalem, Judah, to Babylon. And he's trained up in the civil service of the king of Babylon. And he's given the opportunity for great position and power and wealth and esteem in Babylon. But he's weaned himself off of those things. And he's trusting in the Lord. He's not going the way of the Babylonians in his thinking and his style of life. He's standing apart. He's trusting in the Lord. And it even takes him to the lion's den. And he even trusts the Lord to keep him calm and at peace in the lion's den. And we read that the next morning when the king comes to find him, we read this, no wound was found upon him. Why was no wound found upon Daniel? All the lions all night could have had their feast of him. Quote, because he had trusted in his God. He had a right view of his God. Now for us, where do we find that hope? Where do we find that promise? Where is that trust fed? It is for us primarily in the greater Moses, the greater David, the greater Daniel. It is for us in the Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus gives us the rare jewel of Christian contentment. When we grasp something of his power, as we thought earlier, stilling the storm or calming a man possessed by a demon, we know we can trust him and be restful and content in him. When we grasp something of his understanding of humanity, the way that he sees through the hypocrisy of his enemies, we know we can place our confidence safely in him. When we see him dealing lovingly, patiently and graciously with his foolish disciples, we know we are in good hands if we truly follow him. When we see him going all the way to the cross, even coming out the other side of death, we know that we will always be safe in his hands. He will lead us through the storms of life, the storms of death, the storms of judgment itself, into a greater world, a place where our petty dreams today will seem so small and fragile and stupid. If we have this Jesus, if we are his and he is ours, we have in him all we could ever ask for. If we have him, we can be calm and content. He is the rare, precious jewel of contentment.